much for that lovely introduction, and I'm very pleased that Joyce mentioned my dad, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the lessons learned from my mother, and I'm going to say a bunch of nice things about those lessons, and people may come away with the impression that I got all my life lessons from my mother. That's not true. As was mentioned, I go to Harvard. I went to Harvard Business School and learned some stuff there, but every time I compare what I learned in my MBA compared to what I learned at the kitchen table growing up, it is not a fair comparison. I learned at least 10 times as much at the kitchen table. So thank you, Dad, before I get started with lessons from my mother. So the lessons I learned from my mother, I would like to tell 9 little vignettes to accompany the lessons that I learned from my mother. So number 1, basketball practice. All the Martin's boys and girls were jocks and played sports incessantly. And early on in my high school life, and I think very early on, my mother imposed a rule on me, and that was, if for any reason you felt sufficiently ill to stay at home from school, you were not allowed to go to a sports practice that evening, basketball or otherwise. And I don't know for sure if it was as a result of me having stayed home saying, I feel a little sick, and then at 5 o'clock, hightailing it off to basketball practice at school. But I somehow suspect that probably motivated her. But so she laid down this rule. I think Rick remembers this rule as well, to say, none of that. You can go to basketball practice, go to volleyball practice, golf, whatever, but only if you're feeling well enough to go to school. And the result of this was, I believe, after that point, I did not miss a single day of school for my entire 5 years, because I was incredibly motivated to get to the practice of whatever sport I was playing at the time. So that was lesson 1 I learned from my mother, which is to use the most positive possible of motivations to get to happen what you want to have happen. So I never thought of it as a negative motivation. It's just I had to feel well enough to go to school so that I could get to go to my sports practice. Number 2 lesson, notes for Terry. So we did go to, yes, Terry's laughing. We did go to Elmira District Secondary School, which was a relatively kind of strict school. So it was run with an iron fist, but a loving iron fist, by Merv Duke for how long? 35, maybe 40 years as principal, and then Roger Milliken after him. And there was a really strict kind of attendance culture there, and if you missed school for any reason, you needed a note from your parent, which made lots of sense. Now, my youngest brother Terry, very, very clever fellow, close friend of Malcolm, was very fast in school and was easily tired of hanging around in class when he'd sort of gotten everything done and figured everything out. And he would ask Mom repeatedly, can I just please stay home and kind of hang around with you, or just read it at home? And my mother knew enough to know that even though the notion was, generally speaking, that you should be in school to learn the most, that this would not be the way Terry would learn the most. In fact, Terry would learn to probably dislike school, probably not be very nice in school, whatever. And so anytime Terry asked to stay home from school, she just said fine. But because she was a dutiful, law-abiding mother, she would send Terry to school the next day with the required note. And the note would always say, Terry was away from school yesterday. And this persisted for some amount of time until my mother got called into the vice principal's office to have explained to her that the spirit of the rule was not that you just had to have a note signed by your parents. The note should actually give some rationale for why the child was away from school. And my mother was very much a kind of a principle of the law, not letter of the law person in general. But in this time, she simply held firm and said, nope, that's the rule. The rule is a note. Do I give you notes? Yes, yes. Okay then. And that was it. The practice persisted for as long as Terry was in high school. So the learning there is, while the spirit of the law is important, there are times when the letter of the law works much better. Number 3, Cheerios in church. So our family, during the entire time we grew up, went to Hawksville Mennonite Church. Lovely. Any Hawksville Mennonite Church people here? No? Nobody? Ever gone to Hawksville Mennonite Church? Okay. Yeah, some. Wonderful. Anyway, a lovely church in the hamlet of Hawksville. And as with most Mennonite churches, and the culture within Mennonite churches, sort of quiet, austere, and you're supposed to be kind of well behaved. And we were sitting in a pew, and the pew ahead of us, sort of off to the side, was this mother with, I think, I'm thinking a sort of a 3 or 4 year old boy, and he's getting increasingly agitated, and the reason you can discern from sort of 10 or 15 feet away is he had a little Tupperware container full of Cheerios, and he had eaten all the Cheerios. These, I think, had been given to him to help distract him. He'd eaten all the Cheerios, and he was bugging his mother for more Cheerios and getting ever more kind of agitated about it. And the mother, because this is a nice, quiet Mennonite church, was trying to shush him and keep him quiet so that he didn't disturb anybody. And that's what you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be quiet in church. And my mother sort of watched this for a couple of minutes, and she was getting kind of more agitated, and he was getting more insistent on his Cheerios. And so Mom just got up quietly, went around, and she was far enough away that you couldn't exactly hear exactly what she was saying, but you could tell she was saying something in a very sweet and comforting voice. And you saw the little boy hand over his little Tupperware container to Mom. Mom took the container, walked back to the kitchen, which was at the back of the church, filled it full of Cheerios, brought it back, and gave it to the kid. And I thought, okay, interesting. But since I tended to quiz my mother on a routine basis about just about everything, when we were home that day, I said, well, listen, Mom, why did you do that? What motivated you to go and do what you did? And she said, well, Roger, as she always said, well, Roger, that young boy gains no value at this point from being in church. He can't understand the sermon. He's just too young to go into Sunday school, so I don't know how old he is, three or so. And what you want to have happen is him to appreciate church and feel good about it, so because as and when he learns what's actually going on here, he will have a positive feeling about it. And he's agitated. He's sitting there doing nothing. He's run out of Cheerios because he just had Cheerios. He remembers the Cheerios and wishes he had more Cheerios. And so the thing to do is just give him Cheerios. give him Cheerios, and he'll think better about church and be more capable of appreciating church as he grows up. What's the lesson? The lesson I learned from her is nothing is more important than the development of a young mind. And I think all of us benefited so enormously from that ourselves, but that was the illustration for me. 4, the Harvard C-. Grew up in Wallenstein, which when I was growing up was 50 people, and probably by the time I left Wallenstein when I was 18, it was huge by that time, right? It had to be 100, 150 maybe people. So it was a sprawling metropolis when I left, but I went directly from there to Harvard, where I got this idea, I don't know, but it was in kind of big city in this sort of elite place where for a Mennonite from a small town, it was full of all these fancy, smart people. And generally speaking, I think at universities, wherever you go, there is a whole "I must be the admissions mistake" kind of sense when you get there. Well, for me, being from Wallenstein, from sort of nowhere compared to the big cities, I was sure that, or I had this strong inkling in the back of my mind that I might be the admissions mistake of the year. I took 4 courses, as everybody did in the first semester, and 1 course had an unusual structure. Rather than having midterms in the middle of the course and a final at the end, this one had sort of 2 midterms, one at the 1/3 mark and one at the 2/3 mark. So my first feedback on, gee, Roger, like, are you smart enough and are you any good, was my 3rd term midterm in my Economics 10 course. And sure enough, I got a C-. And I wasn't used to getting C-. I was a good student. I was not as good as my brothers, but I was a perfectly good student, not used to getting C-. And so I was pretty bummed out, and the whole "you must be the admissions mistake" sort of rose in my mind, and so I thought I would call home and sort of commiserate with whoever answered the phone, which was Mom, as it turned out. And so I sort of told her the tale of woe: Economics 10, C-. I don't know. Maybe I'm not up for this. And of course, you'd want your mother to do what? Comfort you and, "No, it's okay, hang in there, everything will be fine." And Mom says in the cheeriest possible voice, it was so cheery, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. "Oh, Roger, just quit with that Harvard thing. Come on home. This is not for you." I'm like, "Mom, this is not the point. This is where you're supposed to tell me to hang in there. You can persevere. It's going to be fine." But she persists. No, it's fine. You just come on back. Come on back. That was a nice experiment. So of course I said, "I am not quitting. I am not coming back. I can do this." From this, I learned from her, intrinsic motivation is so much better than any other kind. It's worth taking a chance. Right? It was a bit chancy, right? Which is, I might have listened to her. I think she knew me well enough that she would probably get the phone hung up on her. But she had to take a chance in order to get the intrinsic motivation. I also learned from her, through that and others, that just don't keep doing things you don't like. Right? Whenever I complained about anything, she would just say, "Oh, just stop doing it then, Roger. I'd come back from basketball practice. Oh, this was a terrible practice. Oh, he made us work on the blah, blah. Oh, just quit, Roger. You know, it's not worth that. I would die before I quit basketball practice. Well, then maybe you don't need to complain about it. So just don't keep doing things you don't like, or the more positive side of it, make things you like out of things that you might not. 5, vicissitudes. So there might be a theme here emerging, but anyway, so whenever you would come to Mother with tales of woe of any sort, whatever, you got exactly the same line, and it was the same line every time, right? What does life have? Life has its vicissitudes. Now, this is an important English language lesson because, I mean, we were privileged in the sense that at an early age we learned a long word that most people don't learn. I'm not sure it's that useful a word, but we knew it and knew it extremely well because that was the summary view of any problem. What was the lesson that I took away from that? Well, the lesson was that nothing can be made perfect. Life does have its vicissitudes, and you have to accept life with its warts. You can't fix absolutely everything. Number 6, Felix and the Christmas tree. So the youngest of the cousins is Felix, Jackie's youngest. He's 6 3/4, he was informing me of today. So at Christmas last year, he would have been around 5. And Felix has a sort of a plus and a minus. He's the absolutely youngest, so the plus is that he's got all these older cousins that he loves all the crazy. The minus is sometimes he's kind of too young to be doing the stuff that the rest of them are, and so he can sometimes be rambunctious when we're supposed to be quiet and calm. And so last year we were all together for Christmas, or I guess a year and a half ago. We were all together for Christmas, and Felix is kind of racing around, and he ends up throwing something that he's just playing with, throwing around, and it hits the Christmas tree, and some balls fall off onto the floor. They don't break, but they fall off onto the floor. And my mother goes up to Felix, and rather than scolding him or whatever, says, "Well, Felix, you see, that's why we don't throw things around indoors." And Felix turns to his beloved grandma and says, "Oh, Grandma, I will never throw a ball in the house ever again." And so the lesson from this is, from Mom, was don't tell people what to do. Present them with ideas that help them think through it for themselves, even if they're 5. Number 7. Where was the last time you had it in your hand? So there are many times I would ask my mother to help me find something. I lost my Tonka toy truck, I lost my baseball, I lost my this, I lost my that. And again, you would think that a loving and kind mother would go find it for you. But no, this never happened. She would always ask me, "Well, where can you remember the last time you had it in your hand?" You know, and I would think through, and she'd help me with this. I remember then. Was that really the last time, Roger? Or can you now think of anything any time that was after that? And then I'd work that through in my head, and finally come up to okay, I think this is the last time I had it. And okay, where exactly was that? Oh, it was up there. So I say, okay, Roger, go check that place out, and inevitably it would be there. And so that's the same lesson for Felix that it was for me, whatever, 40 years ago. Don't tell people what to do. Give them ideas that help them think it through for themselves. Number 8. Mother versus food with Heidi. So we had a miniature schnauzer growing up, and the miniature schnauzer was a product of Jackie's excellent strategy. So Jackie was the fifth, a little girl, and wanted a dog. And because Jackie's very clever, she used the ultimate card, right? I want a baby sister. Right? You can't deny this. You can't deny this. You know, my brothers all have one, and I don't. So this is the how to get a dog thing. And so Mom's like, okay, no baby sister, dog. And so we get so Jackie gets the miniature schnauzer that she wanted more than a baby sister, so it worked marvelously. So, but of course the reason why mothers resist, for all the mothers in the room all know this, the reason mothers resist getting a dog is why, you know, you get to take care of it because it looks to you for food and walks and everything, and that of course happened with Heidi. So Heidi loved Mother with an undying love, but of course Heidi, as many dogs and the breed of dog she is in particular, loved meat, and we decided one day that we had, yes, she remembers, we decided one day, and I think actually it was Terry, myself, and Jackie, but it might have just been Jackie and me, I forget. But anyway, we decided that we needed to do a test. Which did Heidi like better, Mother or meat? I'm getting confirmation here. This is absolutely true. So, in our family room, we had a sort of long piece of the family room. We set up the experiment. So we had Heidi sort of in the middle, and then we took the pillows from the big cushions from the couch and stacked them up on either side of her. And she's a little miniature schnauzer, so we stacked them quite high on either side of her. And then one of us got some hamburger from the fridge to stand on one side, and then we cajoled our dear mother, who was busy in the kitchen doing something else, to come and stand on the other side. And with the experiment being we simultaneously would reveal the meat and have my mom call Heidi come, which my mom would almost never do, and if she ever gave any sense of love or attention to the dog would go, you know, absolutely crazy. And so this was the test. The test was mother versus meat, and it was very, very important to us, but of course incredibly silly. And so we did it, and as you can well imagine, the answer in this small, only modestly intelligent dog's head, very intelligent, sorry Jackie, she leaped over to grab the meat, and in one movement leaped back in and leaped over the other, looking sheepish the entire time to hopefully Mother would not notice that she went for the meat first. So what was the lesson I learned from this, you might be wondering at this point in time? The answer is because Mom was very busy. The five of us were not, easy, and she was busy. The lesson I learned from Mom was don't be afraid to fool around and just be silly. It was silly, but she didn't come and say, you people are silly. She played along, fooled around, and was willing to be just plain silly. Number 9, Dad coming home from South America. There were very few times when we were growing up where either the family wasn't together or Mom and Dad were not together. So they would travel together on trips that had to do with the business. But for a while, Dad was involved with MEDA, Mennonite Economic Development Associates, and as part of that went on a couple of trips to South America to consult on feed mills to the little communities there, to help them have feed mills that would help them be more productive. And this is part of the sort of the MCC development effort. So he was on one of these trips, and it was a particularly long one, as I recall, 2 or 3 weeks, and we all missed him. But this was a little bit different one, because on the day he was flying back from South America, a plane went down in the Caribbean that was coming from South America to North America, and all passengers were killed. And in those days, of course, you couldn't go on flighttracker.com to figure out exactly when your plane is going to, be at. You just hear on the news this notion, and it sort of it rattled us. You hoped it wasn't his plane, but in those days, you had no idea. And I'll always remember when Dad walked through the door, and he was blissfully ignorant of this. He had no idea that on the trip something that had happened and that we knew about. So he kind of walked in, delighted and happy to be home. And my mother just raced over to him, hugged him with all her might, and was sobbing, just absolutely sobbing, which I'd never seen before, because she didn't. That was not so much my mother, but sobbing and sobbing. So happy to see Dad. So from that, watching that, I learned the lesson: don't be afraid to really, really love, even if it creates pain at times. The pain of worrying, the love that she felt for Dad, and vice versa, is well worth it. So that's 9. So you might be asking, is there a lesson of the lessons? Are there any meta lessons from all of these together that we can make sense of them? And I would say I take away 3 lessons from all of these. Lesson number 1: sometimes the same is different, and different is the same. So Terry and I got treated very differently. As you recall, I couldn't go to basketball practice unless I went to school, and so I had to go to school every day, and Terry got to not go to school whenever he darn well pleased. Yes, I worked out. But that's because she treated us differently to produce the same result, to produce somebody who was happy and doing the thing that worked for them, and that was Mom. And the kid in the church got treated differently from others because that's what that kid needed at that point. She didn't go wandering around giving Cheerios randomly to kids in church. But in that particular instance, different meant getting the same result. And sometimes you need the letter of the law to get the results sought by the spirit of the law. Right? The spirit of the law was to have students succeed. Right? She used the letter of the law to get the results desired by the spirit of the law. So sometimes the same can be different. If you treat two people the same, you'll actually get different results you might not want. You treat 2 people differently, you sometimes get the same result. So that's number 1. Number 2 meta lesson is there's no substitute for training a person to think. So the kid in church needed to learn about how to think about church in a productive way, and that meant Cheerios. I needed to figure out for myself that I wanted to stay at Harvard. Nobody could figure that out or teach me that. I had to figure it out. I needed to learn how to find things by myself. Felix needed to learn how to play inside. There's no substitute for training a person to think. And meta lesson number 3 is be optimistic. You can find stuff, kids can develop their minds, they'll do the right thing, you can love and fool around and everything will work out well, and you can get through the vicissitudes. Those are the lessons I learned from my mother. Thank you.